but I do want to start with a hello, Montana, and welcome to the National Cybersecurity Center's Cybersecurity for State Leaders program. My name is Forrest Senti, and I'm the Vice President of Programs and Operations.
And I'm Maddie Gullickson, Program Director of our Secure the Vote initiative.
We are excited to be here with you today. And for background, the NCC, or the National Cybersecurity Center, is a Colorado-based nonprofit dedicated to cyber innovation and raising awareness of pressing cybersecurity issues. Our programs cover things like cyber education, election security, and the co-development of the first ever Space Information Sharing and Analysis Center. Our mission is simply to do what we can to secure the world, and that's why we're excited to talk about this program with you today. So as you may or may not know, 95% of all data breaches come from the government, technology, and retail sectors. Governments are huge targets, not only for the data, but also for the fact that they deliver critical services. And as leaders in the state government, you are the front lines in helping to defend against ongoing attacks. You are the front lines of democracy. By championing investments in cybersecurity for a state, as well as modeling strong cybersecurity practices for not only your colleagues, but your constituents, you're leading the way to a stronger cyber future for all of us.
And that is why we have designed today's training, with you as legislators and legislative staff in mind. We know you're busy, and so if you need to drop off at any point during today's live session, we have created an on-demand, self-paced option for you to be able to complete today's module. This can be accessed at any time via cyberforstateleaders.org. Once you finish today's training, or finish the training on your own time, please take a short post-training survey and you'll receive a certificate demonstrating your completion as well as your dedication to advancing cybersecurity in your state. We have developed a dashboard on our website that will track the number of certificates per state. So make sure to get your certificate and share it through your LinkedIn or social media channels to do your state proud. We've also created an additional opportunity to elevate your state's commitment to enhancing cybersecurity, and that's a cyber charter that state leaders can elect to sign. You can nominate a leader to sign the charter by emailing us at cyber-for-state-leaders@cyber-center.org. Okay, before we get started, we want to say a huge thank you to the speakers who have shared their time and thoughts with us, and to Google for supporting this initiative and helping to make it possible. And to set the stage for the program, we are grateful to have our CEO, retired Lieutenant General Harry Radke. General Radke served for over 35 years in the Air Force, working across multiple sectors of information technology, communications, space network, and cyber operations.
Hello, state leaders. I'm Harry Radke, CEO of the National Cybersecurity Center, and I thank you for joining this training session. Cybersecurity could not be a more critical issue at this time. And I am grateful that so many of you are willing to take this time to learn how to defend yourselves against cyber attacks. I have worked in the areas of network operations and cybersecurity my entire career, from protecting the global information networks of the Department of Defense to developing cybersecurity risk management programs throughout various sectors of government, industry, and academia. I've had real-life, frontline experiences in protecting, defending, and restoring information networks from physical attacks, like establishing the restoration priorities for over 5 million circuits in New York City following the 9/11 terrorist attacks, to fighting cybercrime, espionage, and service denial attacks across both public and private enterprises. As I look across the landscape of what we now know as cyberspace, I see more opportunities for connectivity, collaboration, and innovation than ever before. But at the same time, I also see the rise of foreign threat actors, criminal organizations, and nefarious individuals who can do nearly irreparable damage with a few swift keystrokes. Never before have we dealt with such instantaneous threats, leveled against every sector of society, working daily against our individual identities and assets, critical service distribution systems, information trustworthiness, and the integrity of our most important critical infrastructures. The most recent Microsoft Exchange vulnerability, targeted at the tail of the SolarWinds incident, reveals just how important cybersecurity has become at the federal, state, and local levels of government. And of course, the recent scare at the Florida water treatment facility only makes the connection between cyberspace and our physical space that much more real. Issues like these that states and localities are facing today underline why your participation in this cybersecurity training is so important. State governments provide many services and functions that are critical to maintaining the integrity of our democracy, and you are a critical part of the defense of those activities. So not only do I hope that this raises your level of engagement on cybersecurity topics, but I hope you take advantage of individual cyber best practices shared here today, because by doing so, you are strengthening your state's operations and defenses. Thank you and enjoy the training.
Thanks again for that message, General. And with that, I want to start by talking about how we're going to break up our topics into three main categories, including an overview of why cybersecurity matters for your state, featuring a panel of your Montana State CISO, Senator Pomnikowski, and Representative Homeland, a breakdown of some of the major attacks that you could potentially be a victim of, and finally, an outline of some of the key steps that you can take immediately to start better securing yourself. So please keep in mind that in spite of some of these challenges of pulling a training together like this in the midst of a pandemic, the benefit is that we've been able to bring together a series of experts from all across the country. And while we personally had the opportunity, like the video you just saw, to use a studio in the making of some of these videos, other experts were kind enough to bring us into their homes and even their offices. So some of the experts you'll hear from today include former Department of Homeland Security Cybersecurity Deputy Undersecretary Mark Weatherford, senior experts and researchers from companies like Google, Microsoft, and IBM, and we even have a special message from Shark Tank Shark and cybersecurity guru, Robert Herjavec. And because we have limited time, we have an additional section for discussions and updates on things like election security, small business administration cybersecurity resources, as well as tips from experts on how to prepare for and respond to a cyber attack. We will be continuing to add more additional materials throughout the year, so keep an eye out.
Thank you for that preview, Forrest. And to kick us off for today's special training in Montana, we are grateful to have Governor Gianforte share a special message about today's training. Governor.
Hello, Greg Gianforte here. Before Montanans elected me to serve as their 25th governor, I spent my career in business. My wife Susan and I founded a high-tech company and grew it into Bozeman's largest commercial employer. Every day, hundreds of times a day, bad cyber actors attacked our business. Adopting and exercising smart cyber practices throughout our organization wasn't just important, it was critical. Now, as an elected official, cybersecurity remains front of mind. A successful attack on a state system could mean financial loss or data breaches. As state leaders, we all have a role to play to ensure the state is cyber secure. Many of you are also business owners. We want Montana employers to have access to a skilled cybersecurity workforce. That's why we're focused on building a cybersecurity talent pipeline in Montana. Together, we can ensure that Montana is cyber secure.
Great video, Governor. Thanks again. So with that kickoff, let's go ahead and get started. Like I said at the beginning, if you experience any technical difficulties, please email us at cyber4stateleaders@cyber-center.org. At the very bottom, you'll see a box for Q&A. We're creating space for the end of every single module for you to ask questions. So as things go along or you encounter a topic where you either want a little more discussion or you're curious on something or something maybe you maybe even heard, like the Colonial Pipeline, for example, it's a big topic this week, as we all know, feel free to put that information in the Q&A box. And later on, when we have the panel here in a little bit, we'll be able to talk about them and answer your questions. So to begin the discussion, we're excited to have Senator Pomnikowski, along with Representative Holman, speaking with State CISO Andy Hanks on some of the key challenges and opportunities facing Montana with regards to cybersecurity. And after that panel, we're going to have some time for some questions, and then we'll jump right into the training. So thank you, panelists. Andy, take it away.
Thank you very much. And first, I want to just thank Governor Gianforte, Senator Pomnikowski, Representative Homeland, and the National Cyber Center for putting this together for our state leaders. As Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Montana, obviously cybersecurity is my top priority. And our goal is to protect citizens' data. And so partnering with the National Cybersecurity Center and our legislators is a key ingredient for that to be successful. This year, the state of Montana is partnering with the NGA Policy Academy to implement a statewide strategic cybersecurity workforce development plan. Part of that plan is not only to produce a cybersecurity workforce, but it's also to instill cybersecurity concepts and training into K-12 education, so that even if our citizens don't go into cybersecurity fields, they do have the security awareness training from school that will help them in whatever field that they choose to go into. And the key importance of cybersecurity awareness is, regardless if you're a lawyer or an accountant or a machinist or a cybersecurity professional, having that knowledge will help you in all of those fields to protect not only our state security, but also our state economy. Because as we all know, ransomware is a huge threat to all state governments and local, state and local governments. And so the more awareness we have as a citizenry, the better position our state will be in. Right now, the global threat environment is evolving quickly in sophistication and frequency. So one single click on a phishing email could cost an organization its total revenue for the year. So it's really important to have educated citizenry in our businesses, and our state legislators as leaders in Montana need to have that same awareness so that they can speak to their constituents about that. So I'm really excited about today's session, and I really appreciate everybody that's participating in this. So I just want to, first of all, say that in Montana, we have a Montana Information Security Advisory Council. This is to address significant and continued growth of cyber attacks. Part of our mission with this is to promote cybersecurity awareness through outreach. So this program being put on today by the National Cybersecurity Center really helps us with that. It's really important that we protect our citizens' data from global threats. So we're going to start the panel now, and one of our first topics is, what do we see as the biggest challenges for Montana when it comes to cybersecurity risk? So we wanted to talk through how everyone can be a potential source of a vulnerability, and I want to, I guess I'll open up with Representative Homeland and what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. I'll start my conversation here with probably about everything that I know about cybersecurity came from time that I've spent with Andy. So we've gotten to know each other quite well over the past 4 years. One of the big problems that I see is that we don't have the training capabilities probably to reach everybody that has a connection that could possibly go to the state lines. And so any one of those could possibly hit a wrong button or inadvertently get onto an email that's actually a phishing email and could cause us to actually have some really serious problems. So part of the challenge that I see, and I ran into it quite a bit this year in the legislature, is that we've got people even in our legislature who feel that cybersecurity is just a black hole and you just pour money into it and nothing seems to be happening. My response to that is twofold. One of them is that cybersecurity is not an expense, it's an investment. It's either going to pay me now or pay me later, and the pay me later may be a whole lot more than what it costs to do it now. And secondly is that you can't prove something that didn't happen. So if we've got the correct things in place to be able to stop some of this that could potentially cause us major problems, and we stop it and it doesn't happen, then there's no way to prove that it would have happened. And I think that that's a lot of where Montana's heading, is to try to be able to be proactive and get out there as much as we possibly can to be able to screen things that are happening in the state. But we do have some challenges in the legislature to get a few people convinced that this is actually money that's well spent. That's what I see as one of our big problems.
Thank you, Representative Homeland. And yes, one of the things I think is a great model for all state legislators is to, take an active approach to learning more about cybersecurity. And this is a great first step attending this session today. I will say that between the last legislative session and this most recent one, I met frequently with Representative Homeland. And he'd come into my office for a couple hours once a month or once every other month. And we go through whiteboarding cybersecurity attacks and defenses. And that type of focus and eagerness to learn, I was really impressed with. So thank you for that. Senator Pomachowski, so what do you see as a biggest challenge for Montana when it comes to cybersecurity risk?
I think the vulnerabilities are several fold. One is that as public officials, we have a lot of personal information out in the public domain, and a lot of that can be used against us. Every website, every political mailing probably mentions your spouse or your kids, how long you've lived somewhere, where you went to high school. All of that can be used in identity theft. And to Representative Homeland's point, the success of cybersecurity is a silent and invisible success. That is when we prevail, is that you don't hear about a security breach. I had a career in information technology and computer software, computer programming. I'm pretty keenly aware that things have gotten very, very sophisticated. There were a number of times just this session when I received an email and it was a spoof email. It was, the sender looked like it was MT Leg, which is our login. That is our email provider for Zimbra. That's what we all use. Well, as I am wont to do, I clicked and expanded the sender and found that it was not from our IT. And so I quickly emailed that to Capital IT, our Capital IT person, and said, will you please send out a warning to everyone? This has gone to every legislator. The problem, though, is that what we received in email and then the warning we received later are sometimes lost in 800, 900, 1,000 emails a day. So as savvy as we can be, and honestly, that is an email that we want to pay attention to because we think it has to do with the legislative email. I think another vulnerability is that just think about all of the data in state computers. Every birth and death record, every address change, every health record, every qualification for whatever you're applying for. It's immense. And we have in Montana a duty to protect. I started carrying legislation in 2009 for computer security at the state level, and it was to prevent against identity theft and to put protocols in place in the event of a security breach. So our duty to protect in Montana includes protecting individual privacy and the privacy of information contained within information technology systems. So we must do that as a state. But with so many of us, and it's just, sometimes it's easy to forget this when you're poring over emails and you click something that you think is legitimate. It's kind of constant.
Well, thank you. And those are great points. I'll say that I think it was the penultimate Verizon data breach report listed that 91% of a successful breaches were the result of phishing emails. And one of the things that we try to do at the state level is educate our employees about how to identify phishing emails. And those are getting more and more sophisticated every day. And a lot of times, email is a primary communication tool for most state employees. And so you're getting hundreds of emails a day. And phishing, the cyber threat actors are really good now with their phishing emails They make them have a sense of urgency. They sometimes will, you were talking about as like a public figure, there's a lot of information about you out there. And so one of the techniques that they'll do is look at that public information and they'll mine something from it. So for instance, saying, oh, hey, we went to high school together. Or, hey, this is what this legislation that you're working on right now. I have some information for you. Open the attachment. There's so much information out there about state legislators that they especially need to be careful for phishing, targeted phishing emails, like spear phishing. So, and the other thing that we have with even just state employees is by the nature of working in state government, we're very open and we put a lot of information out there. So I can speak about cases that we've had in state government where a new director or a new administrator would come into the state and that would be updated on the website. And so is that person's assistant. And so what we've seen is cyber threat actors sending an email from like a Gmail account or something, or a Yahoo account, to the director, or somebody sending it as the director to the assistant saying, hey, I need you to transfer this, or I need you to sign this PO. And all the information they used to do that was found on the state websites. So the more transparent and open we are, the more data that is out there for the cyber threat actors to use against us. And so it's a matter of balancing that and making sure that we're doing our best. And the best thing, as a CISO that's responsible for the security budget in the state, I look at where can I get the biggest bang for my buck? And it is always cybersecurity awareness training. You get more out of that than you do anything else. So training employees and legislators and even citizens about how to identify phishing emails is really a top concern for us. So thank you very much for that. Let's talk about the training and learning challenges of staying cyber safe. So in state government, we have budgeting to allocate for providing security awareness training to all state employees. And I imagine most local governments do something similar to that. We know the university systems also look at doing that, but those small and medium businesses or the mom and pop shops that are around Montana, that is a big challenge for them. So I'm wondering if Representative Holman or Senator Pomkowski would like to talk about what we can do to raise awareness to Montana businesses about the importance of security awareness training.
I think probably one of the things that is most beneficial, it's harmful to when it happens to somebody, but when something happens to a business and we get the word out to people that this has happened, I think that would probably make them more aware that this is a possibility, that there's people out there that are bad actors. I'm sure there's people out there right now, and when you're working on building a business, and I built one from scratch as a locksmith for 30 years, but you don't spend your concentration on worrying about whether you're going to have a hacking done. You're worried about where the next job is going to come from. And if something were to happen and we knew about it happen in the state of Montana, because I've had people tell me, oh, nothing like that's ever happened in Montana. I said, yes, it has. And it will continue as long as we don't do everything we can to stop it. But if we can get that word to the people that something happened, whether it be a bank or, because when we find out about it, a lot of times it's been a hacking, it was like 4 or 5 months ago, and it doesn't really have the effect as if it were to have happened just yesterday. And these people are actively going after the market that's out there.
Great, thank you. Senator Pomkowski, do you have any additional comments on that?
I think one of the best things you can do is for small businesses, is to offer the training, right? People are busy, and you're trying to keep a business going. You're trying to come back from a pandemic, you're trying to stay afloat. And so one of the things that is just too easily put aside is training on cybersecurity. I think there are great advantages, though. We've made great advantages as a society because there are more spam blockers. There are more mechanisms from private business. You know, your credit card company will notify you if they think a transaction is suspicious. I think we've learned a lot. And so there are more and more safeguards in place. But really, I think the best way to elevate this in people's minds and to remind them of these things is to offer the training.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I think we're at the point to open it up for questions. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now it looks like we only have one question. If anybody else has any other questions, feel free to put them in. Andy, can you see this question on there? Or do you want me to read it to you?
I cannot. Could
Okay.
you read it?
Cool. So Geraldine Custer asked, we've had a few individuals claiming that our ES&S vote counters could be hacked, yet these machines are not connected to the internet. Most of it is because the company is partnered with Dominion. We also do election audits of precincts and races and issues after the election manually with an appointed board, so we have proof, yet the rumor is floating around. Would anybody like to comment on this issue?
Well, I think I can take a first crack at that. So, you know, the previous election, so in 2016, the focus really was on technical security efforts. And we learned a lot from that we got to put into practice in the 2018 elections. And then in this past election, we had already exercised those controls. We had increased communication between the federal government and state governments down to local governments and state election officials. Really, the biggest challenge we saw in this previous election was misinformation and disinformation campaigns from foreign nation states. So what this question's talking about is a prime example of that. So whereas the technical options might not have been there as they were in 2016, these cyber threat actors then pivoted to using misinformation and disinformation campaigns. And so really we're trying to protect democracy, right? That's what our election process in this country of ours is all about, is protecting democracy. And democracy can be eroded by, you know, even misinformation that's casting doubt on the validity of the elections. I will say that this is a problem that I work on every day. In 2018 in Montana, we stood up a cybersecurity election work group, which included multi-agency, federal, state, local. We had the National Guard, we had Secretary of State's office, we had our fusion center, the MATIC was in there. We had my team was in there, and other participants as well from other areas, where we all coordinated, collaborated, and communicated and supported each other in our efforts to kind of get a full spectrum view of what we were doing. And talking with other states, Montana specifically was in a really good position where we did have paper on every vote. So if there was any kind of concerns about technical, you know, validity of the vote casting, we do have those in Montana. We do have those paper backups. So from a state CISO perspective and working closely with the Secretary of State's office and the National Guard and our Fusion Center and federal partners, I was highly confident that our elections were secure this year.
Cool. Thanks, Andy. We have another question from Justin Griffin as well. This is for the entire panel, if anybody wants to answer. How do you balance evolving technology with evolving threats? New technology is obviously great, but does it present more potential for bad actors as well?
I'd take a crack at that. Yes, it does. But I have to tell you, as we progress, we get savvier also. And so part of this is, part of what IT does is reverse engineer, right? When someone is pinging a system to try and hack in, you try and reverse engineer, what vulnerability do they think they have found? What software are they running to cycle through what might be easily guessed passwords? This is constant, but keep in mind that a lot of businesses, the credit card companies, the credit service agencies, banks, even your email provider, the antivirus software, all that kind of stuff is constantly trying to evolve along with the evolving attempts. And so we're, there's always more to be done, but we've had some pretty great successes at stopping attacks like that.
One thing we've done in Montana that Andy and I have actually sat down and had many conversations about is where they think these problems are coming from, and then what they need to have in order to be able to counter those. And most of those came up in what we call House Bill 10, which is long range IT. And so this year we had a little bit of a struggle to get what they needed, but in the past we've had pretty good luck at getting things through that they needed to have to be able to stop things. So we depend a lot on our SITSD people, state information technology people, to tell us what they think we're going to need in order to be able to combat what they see coming down the pike. And our job is to make sure that we can get them what they need.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, there is a natural lag between emerging technology and security. So oftentimes with emerging technology, we're implementing that, and then we need to catch up and learn how to secure it. And the most important way that we can do that anyone can do that, is to invest into cybersecurity training for your security staff. There's a exponential increase in adoption of cloud services and mobile applications. Well, your classically trained security staff, it does not have the skills they need to secure those. So that's one of the things we focus on. And Representative Holmland mentioned about House Bill 10. This year, we did get one thing passed through that's going to be critical for the state moving in that direction to cloud adoption. In the previous legislative session, the 66th legislature in 2019 they allocated $6.3 million for the Montana Cybersecurity Enhancement Project. And that was 12 different initiatives that we used to improve the state's cybersecurity posture. And I can tell you that has made a world of a difference for us. That was the difference between the state suffering serious attacks versus us not. So I do want to take this opportunity and thank the legislature for that funding in 2019 and also in this past session. Thank you.
That's great. Mm-hmm. So there's one final question for the CISO, and then there are two questions that are really going to be answered as we get into our discussion of phishing and some more of the specific tips to be aware around those issues. And so that question, though, is what is one thing you would suggest members of the state legislature and or their staff do today to make themselves more cyber secure?
Well, I'm not going to just give one thing. I'm going to give a couple of things. The first thing would be to utilize multiple factor authentication anywhere you can. So if you have accounts like bank accounts or email accounts, and that service provider offers multiple factor authentication, then use that. That would help with, upwards of 85% of the threats against your information. And then secondly, looking at using different accounts or using different user IDs and passwords for your different accounts. So if you have a bank account, use username one and then password, some password for that. And then on another account, like your Netflix account, use a different username and a password. And I get a lot of times that these services want you to use your email address. So if you do need to use your email address over and over again as your username, make sure that your passwords are long and strong. The longer a password is, the stronger it is. it's actually stronger to use a passphrase like "I love rock and roll," instead of using a very complex password that has a lot of lowercase, uppercase, and numbers in it. Passphrases with spaces and punctuation in them. If you can get a passphrase that's like 18 characters long, maybe the opening, maybe the chorus of your favorite song. That's the number one thing you can do to protect your accounts.
And I promise that we didn't coordinate that question beforehand because he hit on a couple of things that we are going to dig into a little bit more detail. So that was perfect, actually. Thank you so much. And we're excited to dive into how to set up some of those things as we get further through today's training. So again, a huge thank you to the panelists. Thank you so much for that great discussion. Thank you for the great questions. And the discussion really did touch on a critical point. As we work from broad cybersecurity issues at the state level to your personal security, we really want to emphasize that the varying levels of complexity involved in securing enterprises is significant. Personal security can feel very complex, which is why we're excited to share the resources that we will today. But the time, resources, and strategy required to protect entire state and local enterprises is incredibly challenging. So basically, while the steps we will walk through later on will make you personally much safer, the steps to make state enterprises secure are far more costly and intensive, as I'm sure Andy could attest to. And your role as a state legislator or state staff is critical in supporting those efforts. So with that, the next module is going to tackle what a lot of the standard cyber attacks are, so we definitely are going to jump into phishing for sure, and why they succeed. Then we'll get into how you can defend yourself against those types of attacks.
So, and in kicking off Module 2, I want to take a second to again acknowledge the panel and thank you again. They're going to be staying on for the rest and be able to participate later on if we need to. I know we have a few additional questions, but like I said, we may be able to answer some of these or some of the videos that are coming up. So for this module, we're going to be really focusing on cyber attacks and why they work. And to Maddie's earlier point, we're going to define different types of attacks and how they work. We want to share this as a baseline before getting into the best practices because we know it's easier to implement practices when we know why we're doing it. So as a quick reminder, just like the questions you've already been doing, so thank you, please be sure to keep adding them in the Q&A box so we can do our best to answer them as we go along.
So the first attack that we are going to cover is phishing. This is a huge one. You all mentioned it in the questions. Attempts are everywhere. And as the Senator mentioned, attackers have been getting incredibly advanced, studying our behaviors and fine-tuning their approaches to exploit our vulnerabilities. So in order to better prepare ourselves against this type of attack, we need to understand what it really is and why it works. Forrest, you're going to take this one away.
Imagine checking your email and receiving an alarming message about one of your online accounts. The email says that your account has been compromised, and it provides a link to enter your private information. The email sounds and looks legitimate, but it wasn't real. Instead, it was sent by cybercriminals looking to phish you. Phishing and spear phishing are some of the most prevalent cyber scams because they work. Phishing is when scammers send out mass emails hoping to trick people into divulging personal and financial information by pretending to be a legitimate source like a bank, a trusted retailer, or a delivery service. Phishing scammers often ask the user to reset passwords in an attempt to steal information. And unlike random phishing scams, spear phishing, just like it sounds, is highly targeted and points directly at you. Spear phishing scammers might even use social media or other public information to find out personal details. Then, they use this information to craft fake emails that sound believable and real. This type of scam is one of the most popular methods used against people of influence, just like you. If you fall for a campaign like this, you may end up downloading malicious software or malware that can infect your device. Alternatively, criminals sometimes install a type of malware called ransomware, which is designed to block access to a device until a sum of money, often in cryptocurrency, is paid. Once criminals have control over your device, they can change your passwords, steal your money, and even your identity. The good news is that there are ways to help prevent phishing emails from impacting you. Knowing what they look like is the first step. No legitimate bank, government agency, or business will send you an email requesting that you re-enter your private information. Misspellings, poor grammar, and typos are also clues to watch for. If you receive a phishing email, the best thing to do is stop. Don't click anything in the email or share it, and contact IT support. Stay vigilant, take a breath, and think before you click.
Thank you for that, Forrest. One of the things criminals and bad actors are trying to get through phishing or spear phishing attacks are your passwords. If a criminal doesn't get your password through a phishing attempt, they may try other ways. We have Thomas Russell, our cyber education manager, to share more about that.
Did you know the average person has 27 online accounts? And each of those accounts requires picking a username and a password. I'm sure you all have heard of the advice to pick complicated passwords, but many of us still choose the ones that are easy to remember. On top of that, a lot of us use the same passwords for all of our online accounts, which only increases the chances of being compromised. Part of the reason we may not get too creative when it comes to passwords is because we might assume it takes a lot of work to hack millions and millions of passwords, and so ours is likely safe. But it's not as hard as you might think. There are a few ways hackers work to get your password. Brute force is the simplest, but can also take the longest time. Hackers simply try every combination of words and symbols they can. To make brute force attacks easier, hackers might use a tactic called a dictionary attack. A dictionary attack uses software to try to guess the passwords by randomly cycling through different combinations of words, symbols, and numbers. Some dictionary attack software can work through millions of combinations per second. Be careful answering public survey questions on social media about where you went to high school, what year you graduated, and what city you're from. Criminals can use these hints to try and break your password. Another popular method hackers use to get our passwords is through phishing attacks, or sending fake emails trying to impersonate legit businesses in an attempt to get your credentials. Start with using a password manager. These require you to remember only one complicated password to access your personal password vault. For all your other accounts, the password manager generates complicated random passwords. If you don't use a password manager, try using phrases instead of single words. And whatever you do, don't write your password on a sticky note and leave it on your monitor or on your desk where someone else can see it. Remember, your password is the first line of defense to protect your online information and a starting point for all good cybersecurity.
Thomas, thanks again for an incredibly helpful walkthrough. And to some of the people who put questions in there earlier, like we promised, we're educating a little bit on some of those topics to give you some help. And like Thomas said, passwords are such a critical part of your security. So this is one of the most significant vulnerabilities that we have as people because we create so many passwords and accounts. I've heard that as many people, the average person now has over 100 individual accounts per person. So take the time, it's important. But the next thing we're going to talk about is a slightly less known attack that can compromise your security, especially as an elected official, SIM swapping. This attack is, like I just said, more likely to be used against people just like you. So Maddie?
A SIM card is a small plastic chip in your phone that tells your device which cellular network to connect to and which phone number to use. Most of us don't think twice about our SIM cards, except maybe when we get a new phone. But we should. SIM swapping is a cybercrime that occurs when someone contacts your wireless carrier and manages to convince the call center employee that they are you. Cyber criminals do this by using information from previous hacks, data breaches, or something you publicly shared on social networks. Then, they trick the call center employee into switching the SIM card linked to your phone number and replace it with a SIM card in their possession. In some cases, SIM numbers are changed directly by telecom company employees, bribed by criminals. Once your phone number is assigned to a new card, all of your incoming calls and text messages are routed to whatever device the new SIM card is assigned to. This makes it easy for a bad actor to access your online accounts because they can use two-factor authentication against you, because they are now the ones that account security information is sent to. The devastating results could be anything from selling your social media accounts to stealing your identity. So how do you protect yourself? First of all, contact your network provider and select a PIN that anyone calling to make changes will need to know. Secondly, use better two-factor authentication, such as the Google Authenticator app, rather than short message service, aka text. The Authenticator app links to your phone rather than your phone number, meaning that a hacker would need to get a hold of the actual device in your hand. The next time you pick up your phone, just remember there is more than one way to hack your accounts, and it could come directly from your number. Stay vigilant. A little extra caution could make all the difference.
So similar to swim swapping, another vulnerability we might not think too much about, by the way, great job, Maddie, is what do you do if your device itself is stolen? As legislators, you may be even a greater target of this type of an attack. And here to tell us a little more about it is security expert Maurice Turner.
Hi, my name is Maurice Turner. I'm an election security expert. I'm here to talk to you today about the threats that you might face at the intersection of physical security and cybersecurity. The challenge with physical security is that sometimes those cybersecurity protection measures you have in place can be bypassed if an intruder has physical access to your device or systems. I'll start off with a couple of tips that might be helpful to you. First, consider using a second factor of authentication, like a security key. It works together with your strong password in case that strong password is stolen or somehow compromised through a data breach. Secondly, consider having an automatic lock on your devices. This can be as short as 5 minutes. So that way, if an employee steps away from a device, the system automatically locks without the employee having to do anything. Lastly, many mobile devices have built-in remote wiping or remote tracking features. These can be activated if a device is lost or stolen and turn that device into a digital paperweight. To help put this into practice, here are a couple of scenarios that can get you planning in the right direction. The first scenario: what would happen if you needed to evacuate your building and be out of your office within 60 seconds? What devices can you quickly lock down? And what devices would remain open and unlocked for an intruder to potentially have access to? A second scenario to consider is, what would happen if an employee called you to say that their device had been stolen from their home office overnight? How would you be able to restrict access to the data that's on that device, or to help prevent that employee from being impersonated online? These are just a couple of things to consider at the intersection of physical security and cybersecurity. And as always, practice makes perfect. It's just like buckling up when you get into a car. At first you had to learn it, and someone had to show you, but now it's just second nature. So hopefully security will be second nature to you as well. Thank you for your time, and especially thank you for your efforts in keeping yourself and our community safe.
Maurice mentioned that there are tools to shut down access to your device. For more details on this topic, we suggest you take a look at the one-pager in our guidebook, supplementary materials, and associated links to the type of device you have to dive deeper into how to protect it if it's stolen. Those resources are on our on-demand platform that you all have access to now.
Absolutely. So, and to close out this section, we're going to go back to a point that Andy made earlier during the panel. We're going to switch gears to an even less tangible threat, but one that now takes place in our world daily, that of misinformation and disinformation. For this discussion, we have the NCC's Chief Strategy Officer and resident cybersecurity expert, Mark Weatherford, to share some insights.
Hello, my name is Mark Weatherford, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at the National Cybersecurity Center.
I previously served as the first Deputy Undersecretary for Cybersecurity at the Department of Homeland Security in the Obama administration and was the first Chief Information Security Officer in the state of California in the Schwarzenegger administration. I also served as Colorado's first Chief Information Security Officer under both Governor Bill Owens and Governor Bill Ritter. The challenges of misinformation and disinformation are everywhere today. And while the recent Russian misinformation campaigns to distract American voters and the ongoing fake news about COVID-19 are front and center, they're only the most visible. History is rife with fake news. Everything from Sasquatch to the Flat Earth Society and aliens from Mars to the Pigman. Someone is always out there looking for new ways to exploit those people willing to listen. You may remember the Twitter incident in 2013 when hackers compromised the Associated Press Twitter account and tweeted that there had been explosions at the White House. This was a legitimate source, so most people, for a very short time, assumed the information was factual. The stock market even took a quick but dramatic dip following that tweet. I recently read a story about a sign taped to an elevator in an apartment building informing people that using the elevator would soon cost $35 a month. The tenants were outraged and launched a social media attack on the building manager, only to find out that it was a prank. Unfortunately, the damage was done, and cleaning up the mess took far longer than starting it. A quote attributed to Mark Twain goes, "A lie can travel around the globe while the truth is still putting on its shoes." With the vast reach of social media today, that quote should be amended to say, "A lie can travel to the moon and back while the truth is still sleeping." Misinformation is simply false information, while disinformation is the intentional spreading of that misinformation. While the strict definitions are slightly different, disinformation is a challenge today because social media has created vast opportunities for sharing information that simply didn't exist just 10 or 20 years ago. Combating disinformation is a challenge, make no bones about it. But there are a few things we can all do, and they involve critically thinking about and evaluating information before sharing it. It's an unfortunate sign of the times that we should all be a little paranoid about what we read online today. Here are 8 things to critically evaluate before reacting to social media clickbait. 1, can you readily identify the source of the information, and is the source credible? Sometimes it's difficult to determine, but if it sounds sketchy, it probably is. 2, are there multiple sources providing the same information, or is it just one lone enlightened source? That's a red flag. 3, does it evoke a strong emotional response? Memes have become notorious for generating quick emotional responses because it's so simple to just repost or retweet a meme without even thinking about it. 4, does it sound absurd on its surface? Again, sketchy probably is. 5, check the dates. Stories and pictures often resurface years after originally posted, usually with just a new twist on the message. 6, is it time sensitive or is it going to cost you something? These are always red flags. 7, does it appear to be just satire or is someone just trolling for fun? 8, does it leave you with questions like something seems missing here or these facts don't add up to a complete story? If so, maybe dig a little deeper before becoming another victim in the thread of disinformation. Disinformation and fake news are tearing at the fabric of our national and even global society, pitting family members against family members, friends against friends, and political parties against political parties. All of us need to be consciously aware of how we're consuming information, and more importantly, how we're sharing and spreading information to ensure we aren't contributing to the problem. With some simple critical thinking, we can all be part of the solution.
Okay, that was a ton of information, and now I can imagine we're all feeling a tad bit nervous about how we can protect ourselves against all of this. But the great thing is that if you incorporate the next module's habits into your daily life, you will significantly reduce your risk of any of these attacks being used against you.
And again, that's crucial because the safer you are, by default, the safer your colleagues and constituents can be as well. But because that was so much info, we do want to take a brief moment and answer any questions you might have, and then dive into our final segment. So with the first question, we had an attendee ask about, in addition to phishing attempts, What are some of the more common cyber threats that we as legislative employees should be watching out for or look for signs of? My immediate answer to that, personally, would be one of the pieces of phishing that we don't talk about much is the idea of spear phishing, which is that they've researched and identified somebody that they want to target for a specific reason, whether it be financial or information gain. So in the case of you as a legislative employee, somebody who works for a legislator, like the ones we have on here right now, a lot of your information's in the public domain. You could get a text from somebody within your organization saying, hey, I need something from you right now. Can you email me? Or can you respond to me with a picture of your credit card? Or could you forward me the latest email on XYZ conversation between me and a senator? And that person might be somebody in India or a foreign country that's looking to get your information. They could just be somebody that's trying to get your information, trying to do something bad to you. So spear phishing is one example that I would do. Maddie, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think that's a really good connection.
Good.
Forrest, can I just add something to that?
Well, good. Well, besides that,
Andy, did you want to mention something?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something. So obviously, public figures have a lot of information out there already to begin with. And something Senator Palmakowski said earlier kind of stoked this in my head. One of the things you can do, so when you're setting up an online account, they often ask you to set a couple security questions. So like mother's maiden name, what city did you meet your spouse in? What was your first pet? All of those things can be found probably out there on social media or in some other kind of public forum. So I always recommend that when you're filling out those security questions, pretend like you're somebody else. Answer them as one of your children, or answer them as how your spouse would answer them, or answer them as your best friend would answer them. And that way, if people are mining your information online, they won't be able to get into your account with just using those security questions. And one last thing about that is on social media, we see all the time these questions like, it's like 10 questions and it asks you, did you ever do this? Or, where did you grow up? I would recommend not to answer those. That is a gold mine for cyber threat actors to get your personal information. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say about that.
Senator, do you have anything you wanted to add?
No, Mr. Hanks just hit the same thing that I have cautioned friends against. I'll get on my Facebook page and someone will say, which Harry Potter character are you? Answer these 20 questions. And I just think, oh, for heaven's sake, first of all, I know I'm Hermione. I don't need the test. But don't do that. Don't do that. That's, they're just some of it is just so it just seems so innocuous, and it isn't.
Absolutely, and I think that's the craziest part of this entire industry is how smart people are getting, and their ability to go after people or get information on these types of things. So yeah. Well, there's no more questions. Maddie, do you want to lead us into the next section?
Absolutely, and really, thank you again for those great points, Andy. So welcome to the final module. We've covered why cybersecurity matters, what types of attacks you may see, and now we're going to tackle the most important part, how you can protect yourself and not get duped. There's a lot of material in this section as well, so if you have a tough time taking notes, know there are one-pagers available to highlight the main tips on our site.
So we've broken down these top tips for practicing excellent cyber hygiene into a hopefully easy to remember acronym that stands for deploy multi-factor authentication, update your software regularly, passwords, make them strong, and encrypt and back up your stuff. But ultimately, don't click on things you shouldn't, and what do you do if you accidentally did? Or the acronym, duped. We brought in some top experts to share their tips on each of these topics, and if you don't trust our word as to why these are important, we're excited to have Robert Herjavec, Shark Tank star and founder of the Herjavec Group, to kick us off.
Hi, this is Robert Herjavec. You might know me from Shark Tank. What you might not know is I'm a cybersecurity expert. You know why I'm an expert? Because I've been doing it for 30 years. I started in my 20s with mainframe security, did a lot of VPN and firewalls and all that kind of stuff. And today I run the Herjavec Group, and we're one of the world's leading managed security and complex security companies. We do everything from design and consulting and managing large environments, including many government organizations. And we all know, especially governments, how much we are all under attack. The level of attacks is increasing at a rate never seen before. And it's just going to continue with this post-COVID world and everyone working from home and the digital economy. It's only going to get harder. And you know what? You got to stay smart online and don't get duped. And what does that mean? Deploy multi-factor authentication. Update your software regularly. Passwords, make them stronger. Your first dog is not enough, or your kids' names, make them stronger. Encrypt your messages, files, and backups. Don't click on things you shouldn't.
Thank you so much, sir. We couldn't have said it better. And I think by now everybody's starting to sense a theme about the type of information not to include. So let's get into the details. To start with deploying multi-factor authentication, we're pleased to have Lucian Teo, Google's online global safety lead, to help clarify what MFA really is and how we can and should be using it.
Hi, I'm Lucian Teo, Online Safety Lead at Google. Most of us are used to logging into our various devices and online accounts using a single factor of authentication, like a password. At this point, you would have learned how to create strong passwords, and you'd also know that you should be using unique passwords for every account you have. But given the growing sophistication of cyber threats, especially those aimed at sensitive information held by state legislators and government employees, you might want to consider using more than one type of authentication, or what's called multi-factor authentication. Enabling multi-factor authentication is like adding a PIN-activated security system on top of your normal lock you already have on your front door. Multi-factor authentication incorporates different pieces of information like something you know, something you have, and even something you are. Something you know is the most common type of authentication. Passwords, passphrases, PIN numbers, secret questions, and smartphone swipe patterns all fall into this category. These types of authentication are great, but adding at least one other form of protection is critical for good cybersecurity. Something you have is another type of authentication that requires a piece of physical hardware. This could be a USB key, a smart card, or a random code generated on a dongle. Codes sent to your phone via SMS would also fall into this category, though SMS authentication can fail if you should become a victim of SIM swapping. A better alternative for something you have would be an authenticator app such as Google Authenticator, which requires you to have your physical phone in your possession. You could also use personal biometrics, such as fingerprint scans, facial recognition, iris scan, or even a voice print as a form of authentication. These types of authentication are more difficult to compromise. Most online accounts offer steps for at least two-factor authentication, and keep an eye out for the common question of, would you like to use multi-factor authentication, or would you like to enable two-factor authentication when you sign in or create an account? Your IT department can also help guide you to these options. Though any of your accounts that contain personal information should be protected, it is important to be extra vigilant with your email, social media, and financial accounts, as they are some of the most commonly targeted by cybercriminals and can be especially damaging for civic leaders and state legislators. Besides the obvious theft of information and finances, bad actors can use your accounts to pose as you and deploy harmful and inaccurate news and information. For additional information about setting up multi-factor authentication, contact the specific software or account you're trying to protect. But ultimately, setting up multi-factor authentication is relatively simple and significantly more effective than a simple username and password. And trust me, the extra steps you take to deploy multi-factor authentication on your account, especially in addition to the rest of the dupe practices, will make you safer.
Great explanation, Lucian, and thanks again for giving us that information. So the next step we want to talk through next is really about software updates, why they matter and how to do them. Software updates really are particularly useful in protecting against malware attacks. And here to share with us more about what to do is Ethan Chumley, Senior Cybersecurity Strategist for Microsoft's Defending Democracy program. Ethan, take it away.
Hi, I'm Ethan Chumley with Microsoft's Cybersecurity and Democracy team, and I'm here today to talk to you a bit about hygiene. And no, I don't mean the flossing or the scrubbing kind that are part of your daily routine. I'm referring to cyber hygiene, a critical part of keeping your computer system secure. If you're not sure what hygiene looks like, just think of those little pop-up windows that ask you to install the latest operating system version, the latest app update, or that next patch. And I know, just like you, waiting to install those updates during an already busy day can seem tedious, but this is a key practice to maintaining good security. Getting in the habit of downloading and installing the latest software updates is an easy way to keep yourself, your networks, and your computer safe from a security incident. Why? Because when bugs or vulnerabilities are found in software, they're typically fixed quickly by the software vendors, but it is then dependent on you to install those latest updates when prompted. Just like flossing, updating your systems is a routine preventative action that can keep intruders out and keep your data safe. Not to mention, it's a lot cheaper to be preventative than to clean up after the fact. We encourage regular updates across all of your devices, from the apps on your phone to the software on your laptops, even the smart fridge and Wi-Fi connected thermostats you may have in your home. Of course, your IT departments need to update shared servers and websites and backend systems too. Patching and restarting those shared servers might cause some downtime and feel inconvenient, but well-communicated maintenance windows during off-peak hours are essential to good security across all IT-owned systems. Your security needs are ongoing and they're constantly evolving. There are bad guys out there hoping that you don't apply the latest patches and updates because you'll just be making their jobs easier. Many of the hacks we hear about these days were avoidable, as they relied on victims' computers running old and out-of-date software, often a result of ignoring patches and delaying major software updates for weeks, months, or even years. If you're watching this video, that means you're a leader in your community. This means you are in a position to contribute to a culture of security. And as a leader, you're in the position to help your organization align to security best practices. This might mean allocating funds or asking your IT teams about how they're managing updates responsibly. And finally, it means you're in the position to encourage the community, businesses, nonprofits, and other organizations around you to practice good cyber hygiene, to make sure they are updating their systems and that everyone is encouraging one another to be vigilant about creating a secure environment. I thank you for your time, for your commitment, and thanks for clicking OK on that next update prompt.
Thank you, Ethan. If only we could get into the space of thinking through cyber hygiene like the way we think about our regular hygiene habits.
And I can't agree more. I think if we did that, just like Andy said earlier, we'd solve 91% of our problems, potentially. Yeah. But let's dive into passwords again for a little bit. We keep bringing this up because this is not only one of the most challenging things that we have as individuals to keep track of, but it really is the source of our biggest vulnerability. So to explain a little more on why it matters, we have Stephanie Carruthers, the chief people hacker from IBM's X-Force Red Team. I wish I had a title like that one day. Stephanie is a career white hat hacker and is here to give us the tips that the experts use to make and protect their passwords.
My name is Stephanie Carruthers, or you can call me Snow. I'm the Chief People Hacker at IBM's X-Force Red. I'm so excited to be talking about passwords with you today. Now, to set the stage a little bit, my team and I were a bunch of hackers. We're paid by organizations to find flaws in their cybersecurity before criminals do. Now, with that being said, I wanted to say that I'm coming at this from an attacker point of view. As I'm talking about passwords, I'm also going to be talking about how to make yourself more secure. So you might hear things like your password should be strong and secure, or your password should be long and complex. But what does that actually mean? First, let's take a step back to really understand how criminals can crack or brute force passwords. So let's say you're signing up for a new website and you enter in your new password. Well, what the website does is it takes that password, it scrambles it all around, and it saves it in a database. That scrambling process is called hashing. So if a criminal breaks in and steals all the hashes from that database, they can't just read your password. But what they do is they use really powerful computers and word lists. Now, each word on the word list is hashed as well. It has that same scramble. So what they do is they take your hash of your password that they got from the database and they run it against their word list. And once they find a match, they know exactly what your password is. Now, here comes in your password should be long and complex. So if you take a password that's only 8 characters long and let's just say lowercase letters, that could take seconds to crack. Now, if you take a password that's 10 characters long, let's say 8 lowercase letters and 2 special characters, that could take hours to crack. Hopefully you see where I'm getting at here. Take a password that's 12 characters long and a mix of random uppercase, lowercase, special characters, numbers, just this mix of things, that could take years to crack. Which is perfect. A criminal's probably not going to wait years for your password. They're going to move along to someone else. Now, what do I recommend? I say to be safe, 16 characters, and make sure it's that complex, that randomness. You want to make sure you cannot read any words or see patterns. The key here is the randomness. Now we're on to our next issue of password reuse. So let's say there's a website you log into often. Let's go with your bank. And there's another website you frequent just as much, maybe a social media platform. When you created accounts on these, they probably had some type of strong password requirement. So you use the same one on both websites. Now, maybe that social media platform had not a great security posture. An attacker was able to hack in, steal the hashes, crack your password, and they now have your username and password. Well, attackers are clever. They know that you probably use the same password through different logins. So they might try them at other places, like your bank. Now, that is an issue, but to combat this, we can use password managers. Now, password managers is a place, think of it like a database that stores all of your usernames and passwords to every login that you have. Now, there's many options for password managers. Most of them even have free tiers for the everyday consumer. So what you do is when you sign up for an account, it can be a little tricky, especially as you're adding in all of your accounts, but I promise you it's worth it in the long run. And even as you're signing up for new accounts, they do things like they generate those long, random, complex passwords for you, so you don't have to think of them yourself. They also autofill for you, so you don't have to go in and dig through things and try to find your password. There's lots of conveniences. They have mobile apps, they have browser plugins. They're definitely there for your convenience. So you might be thinking to yourself, great, I've solved a couple of issues. I know how to make a long, complex password to my password manager, and my password manager stores all of my unique login credentials. Now, what happens if an attacker actually gets the password to my password manager or still another website that has a long, complex password? Then what? Well, this is where multi-factor authentication comes into play. Sometimes it's referred to as two-factor authentication. Essentially how it works is if you log into a website and you supply your username and password, you still have to supply a second factor. Now that might be a code in a text message or something you have to approve on an app on your phone. There's different ways that this could work. But essentially, if the attacker doesn't have that second code, they can't log into your accounts. Now, it's really important that you deploy this everywhere you can across every account. Typically, it's under security settings in your account. Now, This isn't the silver bullet. Attackers are getting crafty. Sometimes if they try to log into your account and you do have 2FA, what they might do is launch a social engineering campaign against you. They might call you claiming to be the bank and they need to verify you, so you need to confirm a code that you just received. Or they might text you and say, hey, I used to have this phone number. I accidentally sent my code to you. Can you give it to me? Under no circumstances should you ever give out this code. No organization is going to call you for your multi-factor code or for your password for that matter. All right, a couple of takeaways. Your password should be at least 16 characters and random. The randomness is key here. You should also have a different password for every account you log into. You can use a password manager to help you do this and even help you generate those long and complex passwords. And also enable two-factor authentication on every account possible. Thank you so much for your time, and keep doing what you're doing to keep ourselves and our community safe. Thank you. Stay safe.
That was a great explanation, Stephanie. And while 16 characters may be a little daunting, Andy suggested 18, that's even more. Think about it this way. If you use a password manager, and there are several now, examples include LastPass, Keeper, Dashlane, then you really only have to come up with one super complicated password, and that will help keep you way more secure online.
And I can't agree more. And to kind of take the point home a little more, we're going to talk a little more about encrypting emails and files and backing those important files up. These two are thrown together because they are complementary. They both help protect against malware attacks and also protect you in case you make a mistake and someone does get into your stuff. Our presenter on this issue is NCC board member Leslie Kershaw from Siren Solutions. And we're excited for her to share her 20-plus years experience in cybersecurity to talk us through encryption and backing up your files.
Hello, my name is Leslie Kershaw, and I've spent 20 years in the field of cybersecurity. First, as an NSA offensive cyber operator, using attack methodologies to gain access to systems on behalf of our government. Later, I used those insights to help commercial entities harden their defenses. What I've learned over the years is that security measures cannot be overly cumbersome, otherwise users will not implement them. While the best security is to avoid technology altogether, that's just not realistic. The other thing that I've learned over the years is that no matter how good your security, a determined attacker given enough time, resources, and incentive will gain access to the systems and information that they want. For you, this means that you should do your best to implement tools that make it difficult for an unskilled or moderately skilled attacker. When faced with advanced aggression, the best solution is to formulate a good recovery plan. Today, we'll talk about encrypting email to prevent sensitive data from being viewed by unintended recipients. We'll also talk about how to back up data so that you can recover if you are the victim of an attack. Before the internet, we relied on the Postal Service to deliver messages for us. When we were on vacation, we would send those glossy postcards filled with details about the fun times that we were having. We didn't care if anybody saw them. When faced with difficult news to share, we would write a letter and fold it into an envelope. We may even buy envelopes that had additional security to protect the sensitive information of our writing. When we think of our email messages, we should think of them in the same way. Unencrypted email is that postcard that anyone can read, with limited tools and knowledge. When we communicate sensitive information, we need to use encryption to wrap our message in that protective envelope. There are 3 mechanisms that you can use to encrypt messages. I'll go from the simplest methodology to the most difficult. The first is through enterprise encryption. This will be set by your organization's IT staff. The encryption will leverage SMIME, which allows for the encryption of any type of data that you would like to send. They will issue you a signing certificate that can be tied to your email. Once you install this, you'll simply check the encrypt email button or the lock button to encrypt your email message. As long as your intended recipient's organization also supports an encryption management server, you can send and receive without issue. Leveraging this will take care of 80% of your sensitive communication. If you want to send an email to someone who does not have encryption management at their organization, or you just want to add an extra layer of protection, you can encrypt the document itself. To do this, if you're on a Windows system, you can select to WinZip the document and then add the password. If you're on a Mac system, you can just set a password under a file. Make sure that you send the password over the phone verbally or through a text. Do not send it in the email, because if an attacker has access to the recipient's email, they can unencrypt your message. The last method is to use PGP on your email account and exchange keys with the intended recipient. The install and use of this goes beyond the time that we have left in this video, but there are great resources on the internet that can help you. The only drawback of this method is that it only encrypts plain text emails. Encrypting emails will help you thwart lower-level attackers that attempt to pry into your personal data. Advanced attackers will use sophisticated methods to access your information and may even try to cause damage. Trying to recover from an attack is an emotional and time-consuming endeavor. It's best to prepare for it potentially happening by treating it like insurance. You build up the method to recover, knowing that you might someday need it. Imagine that you knocked over a cup of coffee onto your computer right now, and it won't restart. How would you recover all of that data? The simplest method is to back up your data in an automated way. Once the automation is set, you will never have to think about it again until it's time to recover. I like to use an external drive that I connect via USB to my USB docking port. That way, anytime that I connect my laptop to my external screen, which is also on my docking port, I'm setting up the automated backup without even thinking about it. If you're using a Windows system, just go to your system, then settings, then updates, and security. You'll select that external drive that you just connected via USB. You'll set the interval, and the backups will begin. If you're using a Mac, you have two methods available to you. The first is to connect to iCloud. You'll select the drives and the documents that you want to be automatically updated, and they'll take care of that for you. The good thing about that methodology is that you can also access those files on different devices. You can also set up your Mac for external drive automated backup in a similar way. You'll just go to System Preferences, select the Time Machine, and follow the prompts. I hope that you never have to recover your files or that you're a victim of an attack. But if you are, I hope that this helped you prepare. Have a great day.
That was a great discussion and really critical. We do really appreciate your tips, Leslie. So I do want to take a quick moment before we have our last video. Here shortly after the last video, we're going to spend a little bit of time at the very end of our training today to answer any of your questions that you do have. So please ask any questions on anything that you've seen in today's video. If anything comes up that we can't answer, we'll make sure and get your email and your information and follow up with you as soon as we can. And again, we have Senator Representative and Andy here today to be able to answer your questions. So ask away. We're happy to hear for you. This is for you. So, but to continue the point home, kind of following off from Leslie, one of the things that really helped me in terms of being able to encrypt files or backing up devices is setting calendar alerts. It's something that I've actually taken into my daily life, back to Ethan's point on hygiene, that I do now. So.
Exactly. I mean, we set calendar reminders for everything else, so why not our backups? Okay. All right, well, we have the final topic coming up next, and this is how to avoid clicking on things you shouldn't, and what to do if you accidentally did. To share about how to protect against this, we're pleased to welcome Google's Sunny Consalvo, researcher in security and privacy user experience team lead. Sunny, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, I'm Sunny Consalvo, a researcher at Google who focuses on security, privacy, and abuse topics. By now, You've learned a lot about how to avoid email phishing campaigns, so in this module, we're going to dive a bit more deeply into how to be aware of what not to click on when it comes to web pages, and what to do if you accidentally do. Let's be honest, we've all done something we shouldn't have. We've all clicked that link. You know, the one that takes you to a shady website or starts to download something onto your computer. So what are some ways to avoid doing that? First, let's talk about how you might figure out that you're on a shady web page. One sign might be that if you try to leave the page, you get bombarded with a pop-up asking you some version of, "Are you sure you want to leave this page?" Or maybe, "Install our antivirus program." That should be a red flag right there. Another sign might be that you get a pop-up to sign up for more information, especially if it's hard to click out of that, before you've even reached the actual content. If the site is only mildly shady, be careful to not share any personal information or sign up for anything on your way out, and just X out of that tab. But if it won't let you out, try closing out of your browser entirely. If that doesn't work and you're on a Windows computer, go to your Start button and look for your Task Manager. From your Task Manager, look for your internet browser in the list, select it, then end that task. If you're on an Apple computer, go to the Apple menu, select Force Quit, then look for your internet browser in the list and force it to quit. At this point, it would be a good idea to open your antivirus software and run a scan. If you're unsure how to do this, check in with your legislative IT staff or your personal organization's IT staff to walk you through those steps. Though you may end up on less savory sites through simple internet searches, another way can be from links you receive in an email or text message. Before opening a link from a text, make sure you know who sent it to you, that it's someone you trust, and then it really is them who's sending it. If you don't know who it is or are suspicious that it might not really be who you think it is, don't open it. You can always contact the sender another way, for example, by giving them a call, just to make sure it's not a phishing attack. And when it comes to email, there are several tools you can use to proactively scan for malicious links or attachments. If you want to check where the link leads to, hover over it and make sure you recognize the source and that the source in the hover matches what's in the email. It's a good idea to check the source in your internet searches too, to make sure the domain you're about to click on is the right one. Most email platforms now have some type of alert or warning to draw your attention to potentially suspicious content. With Google's Advanced Protection program, for example, even more stringent checks are performed before you try to download something. Advanced Protection flags and may even block file downloads that may be harmful. These steps to protect yourself aren't done in a vacuum. Remember to keep all of your software, apps, and devices updated, and ask IT for support in installing trusted antivirus software, firewalls, and email filtering. And of course, always back up your files. Criminals can't make you pay for information you already have. If you think your computer or device may be acting in a strange or suspicious way, or if you're simply unsure whether something is wrong, reach out to IT for help. Stay alert, practice good cyber hygiene, watch the other videos in this series for more information about what to look out for, and whatever you do, if you're not sure about it, don't click it. Thanks so much for your time. Your diligence keeps us all safe.
Thanks again, Sunny. Another key thing to remember as you're looking at various sites is whether there's a padlock at the top left of the URL bar, or where the web address is. If there is one, chances are it is more secure. So again, thank you. And thank you for your time. We know that all of you are extremely busy. And so again, the online option is always available to you, even if you want to just rewatch it to get more education or to follow up on a specific section at cyberforstateleaders.org. Please also remember to take the short survey to get your certificate to show your commitment to cybersecurity. And in addition, we will be tracking these certificates by state. So be sure to make your state proud by encouraging your other colleagues or even some of your staff to get as many certificates as possible so as we can have a better trained Montana. And again, if you have a state leader in mind that you think is, should sign the cyber charter, please email us at cyberforstateleaders@cyber-center.org. All of you will automatically be added to our newsletter that will share ongoing security tips and access to roundtable discussions on various issues. Please feel free to share that newsletter with your colleagues and constituents, or unsubscribe if you don't want to. Finally, if you weren't able to get to one of your questions during our Q&A, please send it to cyber4stateleaders@cyber-center.org. And with that, if there are any questions, we'd love to take a moment for any Q&A. It looks like there isn't, so I'll just continue on. So again, thank you to Google and all of our experts that spent their time to get us the information we had today. And thank you for spending time here. We genuinely hope that you learned something and can incorporate some of these new habits into your routine. We look forward to staying connected and appreciate all you do to serve the great state of Montana. And to close this out, Andy Hinks will close us out with some final words.
Thank you, Forrest. So I'm often the face of cybersecurity for Montana's state government. However, I'm just one member of the team. I have a skilled team under me. I have supportive management above me. As state legislators and staff, you're also on Montana's cybersecurity team. And by participating in today's event, you've taken an important step to understand the threats against the state and how important it is for us to mitigate vulnerabilities and reduce risk across the state. I look forward to partnering with all of you in the future to protect our citizens' data. And so in closing, I just want to thank Governor Greg Gianforte again for his commitment to cybersecurity. As I mentioned, his leadership in developing a cybersecurity workforce talent pipeline in Montana to give our employers access to the cybersecurity talent they need to secure their businesses. Again, I'd like to thank Senator Pomnikowski and Representative Homeland for participating in today's event in their efforts in enhancing Montana's cybersecurity posture. They both happen to be council members on our MTI stack, and I appreciate that as well. Also, all the Montana legislators and their staff, thank you for taking the time out of your schedules to attend today's event. And Susan Fox, Montana's Executive Director of Legislative Services, she did a lot of work behind the scenes, coordinating this and making this happen today. So I just want to thank Director Fox for that. And then again, the National Cybersecurity Center, Forrest and Maddie, this was an excellent event. Montana is very happy to and excited to be your first state to do, and I assume we raised the bar pretty high. So we look forward to
extremely high.
Yeah. So thank you again for hosting this for us, and just thank you everybody for your time today.
Thank you so much, everyone. Please be on the lookout for an email from us, and we'll look forward to staying connected with y'all.